Margaret, can we have the first slide up, if that's all right? Great. Who feels a bit like this in life sometimes? Who feels a bit like that? Our culture is driven upon speed, productivity, how much we can get done in a day, how much money, therefore, we can earn in a day. People get in our way, don't they? Get in the way of the tasks that are so important for us to complete. We run from one thing to the next. Where is our space? Where, as I said last time, where's our margin? Where is that time just to slow and just to stop? Because it seems like in our culture, if we were to slow and to stop, people maybe wouldn't respect us. Or maybe I wouldn't get quite so much work done. And I've got a deadline on Tuesday that I've got to fulfill. Life can seem like this. And it's not just about work, it's just about everything. Instantly, we know of everything that's going on in the world because of our smartphones. Instantly, the pace of life is just so rapid. And I want us to think about whether Jesus' pace was one of speed or one of slowing. One of hurry or one of unhurry. I'm going to give some facts just to sort of paint the kind of this moment that we're living in, that our culture seems to aspire to, which I just think is totally against what God has called us to be and the way God has called us to live our lives out. First sort of set of facts is around sleep. Did you know that before the invention of the light bulb, people on average slept 11 hours a night? And the rhythms of our year were that longer days in the summer meant that people worked longer hours in the summer. Agriculturally, that makes sense. And in the winter, when the days were shorter, people slept a lot longer. People went to sleep when it was dark, and people were awake when it was light. But now we have this phone that seems to never leave our side, that vibrates all throughout the night, and we purposely set it to vibrate and to wake us up at a set time. The alarm clock seemed this great invention that we could all wake up before our bodies seemingly were ready to wake up, naturally because the sun was streaming through our curtains. Imagine if we had a yearly rhythm like that, a daily rhythm where, praise God, we would actually be asleep right now. And by the way, no sleeping. I'll be watching. Work. When technology expanded kind of middle of the century and into the 60s, it was predicted that we would spend less and less time as years went on working and have more and more leisure time. Why? Because the influx of technology, it was predicted that, oh great, technology would do all these things for us, therefore we won't have to work quite so much and we can have more leisure time. A Senate subcommittee in 1967 said that Americans, this was a prediction, would averagely work 22 hours a week 27 weeks of the year. Because for productivity-wise, the amount that somebody could do back in the 50s, compared to what they thought someone would be able to do with the aid of technology in the noughties, meant that we wouldn't need to work as much. What has actually happened? It has actually meant that we think that we can work more and more, and that we can get more and more done. You hear of people working 60, 70 hours a week. And that is with technology at our fingertips. Where is the rest? Where is the stopping? Anyone know when the iPhone came out? To go on to our next thing, talking about phones. What year?
2005.
Oh, close, Dave. Bit later. 2007. This great unveiling by Steve Jobs. Praise the Lord, the phone can do more than just what it was designed to do, speaking to people. We can have apps, we can have things at the fingertips, we can have the internet right there. This is a shocking statistic. An iPhone user touches his or her phone 2,617 times a day on average. Seriously? And each user is on his or her phone for 2.5 hours on average a day, over 76 sessions of being on their phone. And for us millennials, that stat doubles. That much time on a device that actually we don't need. Imagine thinking about God 2,617 times a day. 75% of people sleep next to their phones. 90% of people check their phones immediately upon waking. Hannah, for Christmas, bought me a box, which is this, I can't remember exactly what it says on the top now, but it's basically like a place that you can place your phone. This sounds really silly, but I put my phone to bed at night.
Do you read a story?
If it's been good, Paul. I roughly around 8:30, 9 o'clock, I put my phone in that box. And I don't get it out until I've had my breakfast, I've spent some time with the kids in the morning, I've had my shower. It stays in that box. I've also actively tried, it's more difficult to do this, but tried when I walk into the house to put my phone in that box so that I am present with my children and with my wife, Hannah. How often are we touching our phones? Well, apparently 2,617 times when people are talking to us. When Zachary wants to talk to me, wants to play with me. When Primrose wants to dance with me. And I think for some reason that the phone and whoever is on the end of it, or the news or social media, is more important than spending time with my kids. Anyway, that's not my main point in the talk, but dwell on that. Social media then, my next little fact, and we're nearly at the end of the facts. Research shows that an average person will read between 200 and 400 words per minute. So just have that in your mind. The average amount of time spent on social media a day is roughly 2 hours on social media alone. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, etc., etc. The average length of a book, compared with the average amount of words people can read roughly in 1 minute, would mean that if we didn't look at social media for those 2 hours every day, we would be able to read roughly 300 books a year. Imagine that. I genuinely have a sense of achievement when I've read about 2 a month. I'm like, yes, get in. 2 a month. 300. In the hour that most of us will spend on social media before we go to bed, it would only take us less than 6 months to read the entire Bible. Wow. Last thing, just a brief statement. It's a quote about burnout, which is kind of related to all this. A recent study of nearly 7,500 full-time employees found that 23% of people reportedly felt burnt out at work, very often or always, while an additional 44% reported feeling burnout sometimes. If we have the next slide, please. Our culture at this time means that we are so distracted. We are so hurried. We are innately so busy. Have you been on the Underground recently? I used to go to London all the time. We lived, I say we, not me and Hannah, but my family lived down in Cambridge. I'd often go to London. I'm in London occasionally now. But I just think it is so busy. Everybody is on their phones on the Underground. I purposely try to make eye contact with people on the Underground, mainly just to give me a bit of a laugh. But you can't. Everyone's got their AirPods in, they're on the phones. You know, someone walks onto the tube who's pregnant, an elderly person. Does anybody notice? No, who's sitting down? Do they have to stay standing up? Yes. We're also busy, distracted, because an email seems more important than engagement with humans face to face. Social media seems more important. Seeing what people are doing in their lives seems more interesting than just being present to the moment that we're in. One of my really close friends I was chatting to this week was talking about comparison. He's not a Christian, far from it. And he said to me, he said, Simon, you know what? I think I just need to come off social media. And I was like, boom, that's my spiritual in right there. Yes, you do. How often do we look at it as we're on the Underground, as an example, and we're thinking, oh, if only I could be in that place right now. Or if only my kids were so well behaved when they went to the park. What a picturesque day that family's had, etc., etc. You know exactly what I'm talking about, so of course you do. Imagine if the tube was full of people talking to each other, conversing about what's gone on, allowing people to take a seat because they didn't need it. Imagine the pace of life that a Londoner would allow somebody else at rush hour on the tube first, and they'd wait for the next one. Get in the door. Imagine. Anyway, they're my facts. Let's apply this to Jesus. Let's apply this to us. Space, time for ourselves, our families. Grow is about deepening our apprenticeship to Jesus, isn't it? And last time I was talking about putting in to our lives a kind of a rule of life. I talked about a few things. I talked about prayer, community and eating, retreat, margin and reading scripture. Certain things that we can do, certain practices that we can do which will deepen our apprenticeship to Jesus. And I was talking about the trellis and the vine, saying how that we, in order to grow well, like vines do for producing wine, they are attached to a trellis. And it's not constricting, actually it's life-giving because they grow better and healthier. They're allowed to flourish because they have the support of the trellis. That is what a rule of life is, and that's what I explained a bit last time. And I want to think about how we can slow down, unhurry, unbusy ourselves, and add that into our rule of life. I want us to think about this passage in particular. Matthew 11, 28 and 29. This is Jesus talking. And some of you put your hand up to say from that first slide, yeah, this feels like me. I wonder if this feels like Jesus is talking directly to you. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I'm going to read that again, slowly, so you can truly ponder it. And see if Jesus is saying this directly to you tonight in the busyness and the chaos, seemingly, of our modern lives. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When I'm weary, do I go to Jesus? Or do I go to my phone? When I'm burdened, do I sleep less so I can get more done, seemingly get that burden off my back? Or do I rest in the arms of Jesus? When my soul is so anxious about something, do I try to busily sort it out for myself? Do I try to fix it myself? Or do I go to Jesus, who is the rest for my soul? This is the Message translation of that passage. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Who wants that? Who wants that? And who so often doesn't feel like it's there in my life because of all of the stuff that's going on? Jesus gives us many things to combat this, but I want to talk about two in particular, just briefly tonight. Silence and solitude as one thing, and then Sabbath as another. I take a lot of this inspiration from a book by John Mark Comer, fanboy. Please do read it. It is so great. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Just in case John Mark Comer listens to me doing the talk, I've credited him. Please, John. Silence and solitude. Well before Jesus, Zechariah says, "Be silent, all people, before the Lord, for he has roused himself from his holy dwelling." Be silent, all people, before the Lord. I want to tell you a story about my first silent retreat. I was going through the discernment process to see whether truly the Lord was calling me into ministry. And it was about 3 weeks before my interview that I went on. And the guy who was kind of mentoring me in the diocese, sort of discerning with me whether this was the right calling upon my life, said, I really think you need to go on a retreat. So I said, yeah, great. He said, I'll book it for you. I'll sort it out. You just need to arrive here at this time on this date. So I arrive. It's on a Friday night. I get to this place. Nobody there that I knew. And chatting to these people over dinner as we got there when we arrived. It was all great. And then this lady turns to me. And so I'm like 26, 27 at this point. I was definitely the youngest there. She turned to me and said, is this your first silent retreat? I said, pardon? Oh, is this your first silent retreat? I said, is this a silent retreat? She said, yeah, didn't you know it was a silent retreat? I was like, you are actually joking. This is a silent retreat. Anyway, that went on for some time. And I couldn't believe it. I had literally been conned by my mentor to go on this silent retreat. I am an extrovert, as is probably relatively obvious, and silence and me just don't go together. If I'm silent for too long, I will actively talk out loud to myself. So I was like, when do I go home? Oh yeah, it's Sunday middle of the afternoon, and this is Friday night. Hannah was about 32 weeks pregnant. I've never prayed harder that Hannah gave birth really early to Zachary. Anyway, there's a happy element to this story. We go in silence after this meal, and I go to bed thinking that God's having a laugh with me, wake up, go to breakfast, assume that meal times would be a place where you can, chat to people. No. Can you pass the salt? Shh. So even meal times you can't. Anyway, going through it, met the spiritual director on Saturday morning. I was like, you could talk to the spiritual director. It was an absolute lifeline. And said, look, I've never done this before. I didn't even realise this was a silent retreat. She gave me some set things to do, which was amazing. Got to Saturday night and was thinking, God, you know what? I've been on a silent retreat here and I haven't heard you speak yet. I'm kind of waiting for kind of a confirmation that you want me to go forward for ordained ministry. And I've been in silence all day, apart from a 2-hour walk I went on, because I went out of the retreat place, and so therefore I talked to myself for 2 hours out loud. And was like, Lord, you haven't spoken to me yet. What's going on? Went to bed, got up Sunday morning, had like a little service, then again went on a walk. And I was like, God, you're just taking the mick now. Surely in this silence, surely this obedience of silence, surely you should speak to me. Got to the top of this kind of, almost kind of a hill, and you could see down this valley. It'd been overcast the whole weekend as well, just to, add to the joy. And I said, Lord, I want to hear you right now. Say yes if you want me to go forward for ordained ministry, or just say no. At that exact moment, the clouds parted. Honestly, no word of a lie, the clouds parted, and the sun, it seemed like a bit of a Simba moment, just literally came upon me. And it suddenly got so warm, and I was filled with the Spirit. I just tangibly felt the Lord speaking to me. And it wasn't an audible yes, but I was like, okay, I think that's a sign. I prayed there. I said, Lord, if this is a sign, thank you. As soon as I stopped praying, the clouds gathered back over, and it rained again the rest of this few hours I had left in northern Wales. Would God have spoken to me in the noise? Yeah, of course he can. Did God speak very profoundly to me because I had been relatively silent for 24 hours or so? I think so. I had been almost solitary in that because you couldn't talk to anybody. And I was like, Lord, thank you. And since that day, that started my journey with exploring with silence and solitude more. I still find it tough, I'm not going to lie. But whenever I am in silence for an extended period of time, the Lord never fails to speak to me very profoundly. Let's just see what Jesus does. Rob mentioned this morning. Jesus, at the start of his ministry, goes into the wilderness, which is another sort of way of describing solitude, for 40 days. The devil tempts him. As Rob said this morning, it was a bit silly because he came at the end of that, and Jesus has been with his Father for 40 days and 40 nights. He's at his, strongest, relatively speaking. He then goes and does 1 day's ministry. And do you know what the next chapter says at the start of that chapter? It says this. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. 40 days in silence and solitude, bar the devil testing him. 1 day of ministry, and the following day gets up early and goes off again. Not for 40 days, but goes off again. Do I do that? No. Do I wish I could? Yes. He needs time with his Father. So do we. Let's see what Jesus says about silence and solitude himself, how he teaches, not just his own example. This is Matthew 6, 5-6. He says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand praying in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by everyone. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Jesus examples it, and he says that we should do it. Why should we do this in this culture, this moment that we live in? Because you don't have phones by your sides. You don't have the constant noise in your ears of whatever music or anything you're listening to. You don't have people wanting your attention. You are by yourself with God, distraction-free. And God speaks to us. Richard Foster, who is an author, theologian, says this: "Loneliness is inner emptiness. Solitude is inner fulfillment." Silence and solitude feeds our souls. We come to him weary and wanting rest, and he gives it to us. My challenge for you tonight is for you to think about what silence and solitude might mean to you and how you yourself could practice it. And not just for half an hour, for an extended period of time, just abiding in your Father. Make this into your rhythm. Make this a part of your rule of life. Henry Nouwen said, "Without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. We do not take the spiritual life seriously if we do not set aside time to be with God and listen to him." The other thing I just want to talk about is Sabbath, and I will do it briefly. Sabbath is literally a day in which we stop. It does not need to be in silence, nor does it need to be in solitude, but it is a commandment that we are given. Exodus 20, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no work, neither you, nor your son or daughters, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in it. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." I mean, literally, if God himself took a Sabbath, how arrogant are we to think that we can do this life without doing the same? I could end it there. I'll expand slightly more. It is the only practice, bar arguably prayer, which is in all of the Ten Commandments to some degree, that is in the Ten Commandments. Sabbath is the only practice, the only part of our rule of life, which is part of the Ten Commandments. Jesus practices it. Luke 4:16. He went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went to the synagogue, as was his custom. Luke 14:1. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched, but it makes the point that he has Sabbath. It's rest. It's more than just rest. Shabbat, which is the Hebrew word, actually means to delight as well as to rest. Just take a moment, and I'll leave a 30-second pause. What would your perfect 24 hours look like? What could 24 hours look like that could truly, deeply enrich your soul? This is a long quote, but it says this. The Sabbath is an invitation to enter delight. The Sabbath, when experienced as God intended, is the best day of our lives. Without question or thought, is the best day of the week. It is the day we anticipate on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. And the day we remember on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Sabbath is the holy time where we feast, play, dance, have marital time, sing, pray, laugh, tell stories, read, paint, walk, and watch creation in its fullness. Few people are willing to enter Sabbath and sanctify it and make it holy, because a full day of delight and joy is more than most people can bear in a lifetime, let alone a week. That perfect 24 hours that you just thought about. If it's Sabbath, it says yes to two of these answers to these questions. Is it rest? Is it worship? If it's rest, do it. That's Sabbath. If it's worship, do it. That is Sabbath. Eating a meal with friends, that's Sabbath. Playing games with my kids, which for me is restful, is Sabbath. Being by myself is Sabbath. Enjoying God's creation is Sabbath. Actively worshipping God is Sabbath. And the Sabbath day fills our souls. We become delighted in the Lord. And it sustains us for the following 6 days. Shabbat is a verb, though. It is actually something that we have to do, and a practice and a skill that we have to hone. And it is hard. I said at the end of last talk, I am finding this one more difficult because I think it is more difficult at certain different life stages, and we could all claim that we're in one of those. I think young kids do make that more difficult, but it is not impossible. Is it rest? Is it worship? Are you being fulfilled and delighting? Mark, can I invite you up because we're at the end? I want us to have a time where people can be prayed for. Do you want to stand? In our apprenticeship to Jesus, how can we, as weary, burdened people, come to him? How can we sleep more? Prioritize work less, but God more. Put aside the distractions of technology, phones, social media, so that we do not get burnt out, but we delight and rest in Jesus. If you just think to yourself, I am weary, I am tired, I am burdened, come to the side and I would love to pray for you. If you think you are tired and weary and burdened, actively pursue silence and solitude. Actively pursue Sabbath. Actively pursue putting a rule of life in place in your life, that trellis to the vine, so that we can cling and abide to our Lord Jesus. Amen.